Chapter 15, One for All, and All for One. I don't know what's happening now, Colonel. I seem to be losing power and all my controls are acting, well, crazy, said Hunter. Damn it, we're nearly there too, he shouted. They were almost to the Trinity site as Hunter began noticing the controls of the chopper behaving strangely. He could see a bright light growing in intensity a few hundred yards ahead of them as he struggled at the controls of the helicopter. I'm going to have to set this bird down, Colonel, before she goes out completely on me, he hollered. Colonel Schmidt nodded. Then quickly, she took off her helmet and goggles, turning around to face Drake and Stevens. Hang on everybody, we're going down, grab your equipment Drake, ASAP, she yelled. Drake understood. By this time, they could see a bright light, and what appeared to be a group of people standing underneath it in the desert. The large Huey's motors whinnied and whined like no engine Hunter had ever heard before. It was as if the power were just being sucked out of it. Then was followed by an eerie silence, as the only sound they heard then was the whipping of air outside by the twin blades above them, followed next by all the lights and electronic controls going completely dark. Luckily, they were only a few feet from the desert floor when that happened, as the chopper hit the ground with a solid thud. After the impact, there was a moment or two of silence from the four in the chopper as they finally realized they were on the ground, and alive. Hunter quickly pulled off his helmet and goggles, looking at Drake, Stevens, and the Colonel. You guys didn't think I could do it, did you? He asked, with a huge grin on his face. We never had a doubt, said Stevens. Everyone all right? Shouted Schmidt. She heard sounds of affirmation from the others. Very well, let's get out and see what's going on out there, ordered Schmidt. She then began undoing her seatbelts while checking the Huey's flight systems for damage. Alice Stevens was the first to jump out of the chopper, landing softly in the bushes. She stood up and looked around to get her bearings, immediately noticing a bright light shining in the sky which was illuminating the ground in front of the helicopter for hundreds of yards. Hey Drake, if you hand me some of that equipment over there, I can help you unload it, she asked. Drake tossed her 2 camera bags and a tripod. As she slowly turned around to place the bags on the ground below the helicopter, she caught a glimpse of 2 young girls standing before her a short distance away. Hello? She asked. Who are you? The 2 young girls ran up to the helicopter. Hi, I'm Leanne and this is my cousin Bobby, said Leanne. Are you all right? She asked. We thought you were going to crash there for a minute, exclaimed Bobby. Are you here to watch the spaceship land too? She asked. Hold on just a moment, young lady. Stevens turned back around and shouted into the interior of the helicopter. You're not going to believe this, everyone, but we've got company, she shouted. Stevens turned back around to the 2 young girls. My name's Alice. What are you kids doing out here in the middle of the missile range all by yourselves at night? She asked. My mom drove us out here from Socorro, said Bobby. Yeah, she drove really fast and had to speed away from these agents who holding my dad and uncle for questioning, said Leanne. Come on, I mean like, they think we're terrorists or something. I see, Stevens nodded. Your last names wouldn't happen to be Thompson, would it? She asked. It would indeed, said a voice from behind. A startled Stevens turned around and saw a hand reaching towards her. Hi, my name's Alex Thompson. I guess you could say I'm one of those responsible for all this excitement out here, said Alex, offering his hand. Hunter and Schmidt heard the voices and jumped down from the chopper into the bushes next to Stevens. So, you're the famous Alex Thompson, asked Hunter, shaking Alex's hand. Good to finally meet you. Where are the other terrorist cohorts of yours? He asked jokingly. They are over there somewhere in the dark, answered Alex, pointing to the open area closer toward the Trinity marker. And no, we're not terrorists, emphasized Alex. There is another force at work behind all these events. Well, maybe so, however you still have some explaining to do, said Colonel Schmidt, also shaking Alex's hand. But first things first, will one of you please tell us what's going on, and what the hell you and your family are doing out here? She asked. Alex stood for a moment stumbling over his words as he tried his best to explain to Colonel Schmidt and Hunter all that had happened over the last 2 days, without giving the impression that he was a complete lunatic. He motioned for Hunter and Schmidt to follow him as he explained the story further, pointing up in the sky towards the sphere. "There it is," said Alex. As they stood gawking up at the sphere, which by now was growing brighter by the second. The winds also began to pick up as the sky grew even darker. Lieutenant Eric Nieves walked briskly along the corridor of the command center. Even though he was in a hurry, he didn't want to look like he was in a hurry. This had been one of those days, where every moment he rested and sat down, something new would suddenly pop up and he would have to start running around all over again. Finally, he felt it was more productive to just keep walking rather than take any chances. Nieves opened the door, not even stopping to catch his breath. "General Coulter, your helicopter is ready," said the lieutenant, as he hastily entered the conference room and stood on the other side of the long table. He stood at attention and motionless, as General Coulter continued working on his report for the NSA and the President of the United States. Coulter looked up. "It's about damn time," said Coulter tersely, as he stood up from the table, folded his laptop and placed it carefully into his briefcase. "Ready," mumbled the general, as he followed his assistant out of the room and through the lobby towards the helicopter pad. "Have you been able to locate Colonel Schmidt at the large array or the 4 agents who were transporting the Thompsons?" asked Coulter. "No sir, not yet. It seems that all radio and cell phone communications within a radius of about 100 miles of White Sands missile range are being disrupted by some unknown source," explained Nieves. "How about our landlines?" Coulter asked. "They're working fine sir. Seems the disturbance has only affected radio and cell phone transmissions." "Well, that's good to hear," said Coulter. "But unfortunately sir, most of our critical communications are either radio or cellular," the lieutenant pointed out. "Also, there is something else sir." The aide stopped and turned to the general. "And what is that?" asked Coulter. "Well, it's not yet confirmed by our other stations yet." "Okay. Until it is confirmed, we can't be sure what it is sir," said Nieves, hesitating. "Lieutenant, just spit it out," said Coulter. "NORAD's been tracking a large unidentifiable object for the last few minutes. It just showed up on our stations over the Pacific Ocean as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. It's registering a very large radar signature, and it seems to be heading this way." "Damn it, the kid was right," mumbled Coulter to himself. "I beg your pardon sir," asked Nieves. "Never mind," answered Coulter. "Follow me," said the general as he quickly turned and headed for the waiting helicopters. Drake busied himself by setting up the equipment he had brought with him from the array. "Hey guys, I'm getting something on these cameras," hollered Drake. "It's huge, come take a look." Stevens was the first to arrive. "Are these those new infrared cameras?" she asked. "Yep, I borrowed them from General Coulter's team," said Drake proudly. "In fact, most of the portable stuff they brought is some of the latest gear available." "Apparently, they spared no expense," joked Drake. Drake soon had a small crowd gathering around his equipment as he continued setting up more monitors, so they could all see the large object clearly as it loomed over them. High above them in the dark expanse of the New Mexico evening sky, there loomed a dark shapeless void that was rapidly increasing in size as it approached. As Jimmy and his great-grandfather stared silently up at the sky, they felt a shiver of fear. It was the unseen darkness that frightened them, even though they both felt a greater subliminal comfort in its increasing nearness. Something within them both soon felt a quiet peace, as well as a gentle understanding of its ultimate purpose. They could not even begin to understand the technological wherewithal of the vessel that approached him and his family as they stood, literally defenseless, here on the desert floor. Somehow, however, they knew there was no hostility intended here. The light coming from within the sphere grew exponentially as the vessel approached, as if by some unearthly means, it was creating a beacon to guide the celestial traveler to its port. As if caught up in some Ezekielian reenactment, Jimmy and his great-grandfather both felt a powerful presence weighing upon their whole being. Millions of thoughts and images came flooding into their minds, as Jimmy and his great-grandfather were reliving the experiences of 1,000 lifetimes in a single span of time. Then suddenly it stopped. Jimmy and Grandpa JJ glanced at each other for a moment, sharing their collective thoughts in unison. Then a bright flash of light, followed by a large open room, where they both stood alone, with bright light permeating all around them. "Grandpa, where are we?" asked Jimmy. "I'm not sure, Jimmy, but if I were to guess I would say, we are somewhere within the spaceship," said Grandpa JJ, trying to sound confident. A voice came into their minds. "Welcome," said the voice. "Hi," answered Jimmy and his great-grandfather simultaneously. They stood, looking around for some point of reference to lock onto in the brightness of the surroundings. "Where are we?" Jimmy asked first. "You are in a transitory," explained the voice. "A temporary holding room, but perhaps you will relate better to this," added the familiar voice behind them. It was Reevan. "Are you the real Reevan, or is this image coming from the sphere?" asked Jimmy. "I am the real Reevan," said Reevan with a slight smile as he walked closer to Jimmy and his great-grandfather and stopped. "I thought you were. You thought I was dead?" "No. Thanks to your great-grandfather I survived the accident, along with one of my companions. However, the other one did not survive. If it weren't for your great-grandfather and his friend entering our spaceship and checking on us when they did, we might well have perished." "Sheer luck then," said Grandpa JJ. "Not luck, fate," Reevan paused. "You do believe in fate, don't you, Jim?" asked Reevan. "It's a trait that our species share. Qualities we admire, such as faith, hope or love," explained Reevan. "And another human trait we have admired from observing you, friendship," added Reevan, motioning behind Jimmy and JJ. "Hello, JJ, remember me?" asked a familiar voice from behind. Jimmy and his great-grandfather turned around and saw who it was that had just spoken. "Allen, is that really you?" asked JJ, as a huge smile slowly grew upon his face. He quickly leaped forward to grab Allen's hand, followed by laughter, as the two friends shared a moment between them, connecting the span of over 60 years that separated friendship, guilt and shame in a single instant. Jim stepped back a moment to look at his friend Allen. He had aged, but only slightly, looking very much like any healthy man in his mid-30s. "You're looking well, my friend," said Allen. "And you never were a good liar," said JJ as they both laughed again. JJ turned and looked at Reevan. "How is it that Allen looks so, well? Why does he look so young?" "Well, it's a little difficult to explain, but from our perspective, we left Earth just a few years ago. I believe one of your scientists, Albert Einstein, described it best in his theory of relativity." "I see," said JJ. "Grandpa JJ, is this your friend?" asked Jimmy. "Yes, Jimmy, this is my friend Allen Larkin, the one I told you about," he said. "Grandpa JJ? Wow, I guess I have been away a long time," said Allen, placing one hand on Jimmy's shoulder. "Son, I could tell you some stories about your great-grandpa." Jimmy smiled as Allen continued. He loved stories. The two men continued catching up on the years lost between them, as Reevan stepped over next to Jimmy. "I especially want to thank you, Jimmy, for helping return the sphere to us." "You're welcome," said Jimmy. Jimmy noticed Reevan looked as if he still had more to say. "Can I ask you something, Reevan?" asked Jimmy. "Of course, Jimmy," said Reevan. "You mentioned something about hope earlier. Do you think there is hope for us?" "You mean you want to know if we feel humans have made the right choice? You want to know what the future will hold for your people, and you want to know if we are going to destroy the Earth," said Reevan. Jimmy's eyes widened. "Jimmy, none of us, not even my people, know what the future will bring for us. Even with all our technology," Reevan motioned, indicating the ship around them. "We still don't know what will or may happen to us in the future. We can only look at what has happened to others in the past, and try to learn from their successes, or failures. This is what brought us to you." Jimmy looked confused for a moment, and then slowly his expression changed from puzzlement to understanding. "Oh, now you're starting to sound just like my dad." Reevan laughed, such laughter that it caused Allen and JJ to end their conversation and turn to see where the laughter was coming from. "Your dad is a smart man, Jimmy," said Reevan. "And I believe that you are a smart boy too," added Reevan. "As long as there are humans who think like you and your dad, then there is hope that your people will survive to make it." "To make it where?" asked Grandpa JJ. Reevan motioned upwards, to the stars, he said. Reevan looked at Jimmy again and smiled, and then he looked over at Allen and JJ, who now had all formed a small circle. It's time, Reevan said to Allen. Allen stepped back and turned towards JJ and Jimmy. It's been good seeing you again, JJ. You aren't leaving, are you? Asked JJ, looking at Allen. Allen's not staying here with us, is he? Asked JJ, looking at Reevan this time. This is where I belong now, JJ. I have no place here on Earth to return to anyway, explained Allen. Goodbye, JJ, it was good seeing you again. You too, Jimmy. I'm glad we had a chance to meet, said Allen, as he turned around and faded into darkness. We will have to leave soon, said Reevan. You, Jimmy, must return and be with your parents. Go and be with your family, live in peace, and most of all, continue to learn from the past and hope for the future. Perhaps, one day we may meet again, explained Reevan. As for you, JJ, you may come with us if you like. It's your choice, we will give you some time to decide, but you must make the choice, said Reevan, pointing at JJ. There was a moment of quiet between them, as Reevan's words had a chance to sink in. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light, as Jimmy and his great-grandfather found they were standing once again on the desert floor. Look, it's Grandpa JJ and Jimmy, they're back, shouted Leanne. Where have you two been? We were taken inside the ship, said Jimmy as he quickly turned towards his Grandpa JJ. Are you going to go back with them, Grandpa JJ? You're going to do what? They asked. Grandpa JJ turned quickly around to face all of them, collecting his thoughts. Reevan invited me to go back with them, my friend Allen was with them. He stopped and looked around at the faces standing before him. I don't have the heart to tell them how tempted I was, he thought. Why not? JJ said out loud. There came a flurry of protests from the others as Jimmy and Grandpa JJ stared at each other silently for a few moments. I think you should go with them, Grandpa. I know that's what you really want to do, said Jimmy. And I know you've been carrying this burden around with you for a long time. JJ turned away for a moment, as he thought. You know, it was hard carrying this with me for all these years. It sometimes seemed like maybe I just imagined it all, or I was losing my mind. He turned and looked at Alex. JJ turned his head upwards. Reevan, yelled Grandpa JJ, I've made my decision. Very well, replied Reevan, who was now suddenly standing next to Alex, surprising him for a moment. Alex, nice to finally meet you, said Reevan. Your son is a very bright boy, take good care of him, Reevan added. A few moments later the others had gathered up enough courage to come up and meet Reevan. He took a few moments to speak with each of them as he eventually made his way over to the other four, who were observing quietly from a distance, close to the grounded helicopter. Meanwhile, Grandpa JJ took the opportunity to tell everyone goodbye. Mr. Drake, Miss Stevens, Mr. Hunter, and Colonel Schmidt, it's a pleasure to meet you as well, said Reevan. I apologize about your helicopter, Colonel. I couldn't have you running into anyone in the dark, he winked. It will operate just fine as soon as we leave. Reevan glanced at Drake a moment. I know, you have so many questions, he said, then he paused a moment and turned back towards Drake. No, we are not from Epsilon Eridani, that is just an outpost of ours. But, you were very close, keep on looking, you will find it one day. Oh, I almost forgot, and as for your cameras and equipment, you will find later that no recordings of this event were made after we've left. I'm sorry, Reevan apologized and turned back towards Alex and JJ. It is time, said Reevan. Are you ready? He asked, looking at JJ. Alex turned towards his grandfather. Pop, go ahead and go with them, we will miss you, but I think we'll all feel better knowing that where you are, you'll be well taken care of. He walked up to his grandfather and grabbed him gently by the shoulders, hugged him, and then looked him in the eye. Think of it as another one of your great adventures, Pop, smiled Alex. Jim Thompson stood there thinking quietly to himself for a moment, not sure whether he wanted to leave or not. JJ turned to Reevan. I am ready, said JJ, turning back to Alex and the others. Goodbye again to all of you, I will miss you, he said. But you know your old Grandpa JJ just couldn't pass this up, he smiled. We must leave now, JJ. There are several helicopters approaching from the south, said Reevan. It is General Coulter and his team. The rest of you should also leave as soon as possible. We can provide some assistance, but only for a limited time, explained Reevan. Goodbye everyone, said Reevan, as he and Grandpa JJ disappeared in a brilliant flash of light.
You've been listening to The Thompson Sphere by David E. Farmer, also now available on Amazon's Kindle. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more chapters coming soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.